I've learned to realize that security is a people problem. It's not a tech problem. There's a tech solution for everything, but people is what creates the whole friction in implementing good security. Whenever I've jumped into a new organization, enrolling, I think all I'm doing for the first few months is just enrollment conversation. I'm enrolling a founder into the world which we are walking into, right? Like what we are trying to build here as security. Then talking to stakeholders, right? Talking to business folks. And I think it's about slight nudges across. So certainly browser is a very important vector nowadays because you are pretty much doing, as you rightly said, you're pretty much doing everything there on your browser, right? 80% of your time is kind of spent on it. Yes, as you said, like browser, you can take over devices as well. But my problem starts with, okay, if you've taken over the browser itself, 80% of my work you've taken over, right? So you don't, we'll get to the device later. Right?
If you are not innately curious, being a good security practitioner or a good hacker becomes a little bit challenging. But if you're curious, then you just say, why do you know about, you have so much additional information in your head because out of curiosity, you look them up.
I am excited to welcome Jayesh to our show today. Jayesh is the founder of Cloud Village, an open space to meet folks interested in offensive and defensive aspects of cloud security. What's also impressive about Jayesh's perspective is how he's created a thriving community around cloud security while simultaneously building his own impressive career. Jayesh is currently CEO and founder of Cloudurance Security, where he helps small and mid-sized companies kickstart their security journey with fractional virtual CISO services. Jayesh is also no stranger to our show. We featured him on our DEF CON special episode last year, and I'm thrilled to welcome him back to the show. Thanks, Jayesh, for joining us.
Hey, thank you, John, for having me here, and thank you for the kind introduction.
No problem. So you've already appeared on our show once, but for new listeners, do share a bit more about Cloud Village and what you do as a CEO of Cloudurance Security.
Sure. Thank you for that, John. So Cloud Village started in 2019. I was presenting in DEF CON in 2018 for some research around cloud security, and I built an open source tool which could do CSPM. And I came across villages and I saw that there was no Cloud Village. So in 2019, I started one. This is our 7th year in DEF CON. Over the years, we have expanded it to multiple conferences. This year, we are in RSA again, B-Side San Francisco, and B-Side Sham as well, which happens in Maryland, Baltimore. Cloud Village is a space, from a foundational perspective, it's a space where wherever you are in your cloud security journey, whether you have just opened your cloud account and you're tinkering with it, or you've been around for a while, you come into Cloud Village and you would we would make sure that you take something back home, right? How do we do that? Is we have talks all throughout 2.5 days when we are in DEF CON. Talks are a combination of standard talks, tool demos, workshops, lightning talks, etc. And we keep tinkering with the formats. And if you're someone who loves capture the flag events, we have continuous capture the flag Jeopardy style CTF entirely focused on cloud security. For continuous 40 odd hours, it stays and top 3 team gets awarded. So this is what we generally do, but essentially creating a space where people can walk in and learn from various events which are happening and it can contribute to their cloud security journey. Like in RSA, we are bringing in talks this year for the first time. We've had CTFs earlier in B-Side SF and B-Side Sham. It's CTF, a bit of talks in B-Side Sham as well. So wherever we find the room and the audience, we try to figure out what all we can bring forward to folks. Right. So this is what essentially is Cloud Village. Folks can contribute to Cloud Village in many ways. You can be an attendee. You can come and volunteer with us. You can sponsor us to help us get through this journey, right? Or if you're a conference where you love the work which we are doing, you can tell us that, hey, would you want to do Cloud Village here? And we're more than happy to do that. So we're kind of flexible in that sense. That's Cloud Village. Cloudurance Security got opened up I think a couple of years back when the name got opened up because I was giving Black Hat trainings in Black Hat USA, Black Hat Asia, and a couple of other conferences as well. And I was like, hey, I should build a company so that there's a name attached to it. And that's how Cloudurance Security got started. After a few trainings, I realized that, okay, I want to do something more. So I joined my last company called CoinSwitch, which is a crypto-based exchange. And they had a fintech offering also called Lemon. So I was a CISO for them. Over the last 2 years, like 1.5, 2 years working with them, I realized that while we have solved a lot of problem statement regarding security, regarding compliance, creating structures, I realized that there is a big divide where either you have companies who care about security. These are big companies who care about security. They have a CISO, they have a full-blown security teams, a very good budget. And then you have companies which are just not doing anything about security. These are small to mid-sized companies, right? So I have gotten back on Cloudurance Security in the last 3 months, where while we're still giving trainings, I'm pushing heavily on the virtual CISO offerings or security services, which we are offering. The idea is that the small and mid-sized companies don't have to just think that, okay, with a high budget, we would be able to get security in place. You can spend a few hours with us. I've been doing product security for out of 13 and a half years or 14 years of my career. I've done product security for more than 12 years. So I've fallen firsthand so many times that I can make sure that you're not falling firsthand, right? So essentially enabling small, mid-sized companies to have a baseline level of security, and good security, not driven by compliance, but like driven foundationally by the culture of the company, and setting up a platform for them that as they grow bigger, they don't reach a juncture where security just becomes very overwhelming, making it more like an enabler for the business and securing product in the process. So yeah, this is what I'm trying to achieve with Cloudurance Security.
Very nice. Let me ask you a follow-up question. I'm going to start with Cloud Village. Let me ask a question about Cloud Village, and then I'll ask you a question about Cloudurance as well. Mm-hmm. On the Cloud Village side, one of the questions I have is definitely, on the security, continuum, there are definitely defensive security kind of activities that you do, and then there's offensive security activities that you do. And I feel like you're doing both, but are you only focused on the infrastructure, like the platform parts of the cloud environments, like AWS, GCP, Azure, and the services they offer, and that of course people build on, or are you more inclusive and you include SaaS apps and other kind of things that are running on top of it?
So to answer your first question, yes, Cloud Village has offensive and defensive both kind of activities there. Any hackathon, you generally get a lot of offensive work or research work which comes our way. We have our call for paper, we have a review panel. They assess the quality of talk and like what's worth for the audience, right? And more often than not, if I have to put percentage, there'll be a good percentage of attack-based talk. But then again, there is a healthy balance, because we have multiple formats, like talks, standard talks, lightning talk, tool demos, right? So we in past we have seen lightning talks talking about how someone handled a particular event, right? Like an incident which happened. So what was their strategy around it, right? From a defense perspective. So that kind of comes in lightning talks. We have had talks where folks have covered that how they are taking care of defenses of their infrastructure, right? And how they are navigating through it, either via help of open source tool or homegrown automation, etc. Right? So those get into the defense realm. From capture the flag perspective, it's very, very hard to build defense-based challenges, right? It takes a lot of effort. There's a lot of guard railing and everything has to be put in place. But we've managed to have quite a few defense challenges along the way. So this is how we bring in, while attack is something very natural for any hackathon, this is how we try to mix it with the defense side of the world as well, right?
Yeah, and so great. Thanks for that. Thanks for the answer. As you were saying it, I think as a CISO in 2018, 2019, I had moved into a company that just was full on into the cloud. And there really weren't a lot of tools out there to kind of make sure your defensive, strategy was set. And, it seemed like I had breaches all the time. I had all sorts of so that happened to me. I think that's where most of my gray hair came from, and my hair fell out and that kind of stuff. So, but the interesting thing about it is that most of my problems there were just infrastructure problems. But eventually, what I started to see was that we started having problems in the software that was running on top of the cloud, right? And just invariably, you're going to have developers that don't write the cleanest code, or of course, most of the time they believe that. Well, why would someone do that? Well, I don't know why hackers do what they do, but they do, And I think that there's some amount of work that goes above the platform. I guess people can also talk about what's above the platform as well in your Cloud Village.
Yeah. So yes, tying it up to tying this question up to the question you had asked me previously, right? We have talks and even challenges which are not just limited to infrastructure or its configuration, right? Mm-hmm. Anything and everything which companies are using as cloud as their foundation in terms of not just hosting, computes, or storage, right? Also about services which are there in terms of identity and access, in terms of CI/CD pipeline, right? In terms of we have challenges and talks also in the past where someone found access key ID and secret keys in the GitHub somewhere in the history, right? And they used it to abuse it. And then in our CTF challenges, we call it then to find the flag, right? So right. This is how we incorporate. So there is no real limit to different types of talks which can happen in Cloud Village. But yes, they are around the foundation of cloud infrastructure. And
you're doing something in the cloud. If it's offensive or defensive, Cloud Village is a place to come look for that content, right? Yeah. And then on Cloudurance security, my question for you is look, I agree with you 100%. I think small and medium businesses are getting by. Right. I feel like most of them have kind of a hope strategy that they hope nothing's happening to them. And, hope is not a strategy. So I love it that you're doing work with small and medium businesses. But I wanted to talk about product security in perspective, in particular. When we talk about product security, you're talking about working with technology companies that are building products that are going to go on the cloud. And then how do you make sure that they're delivering product securely? Is that right? Is that what you're thinking about with respect to your business? Is it?
Yes, but not limiting myself to only if you're hosted on cloud. That's where a lot of my research and my experience does come in, right? But I don't have a biasness that you should be on cloud. But fortunately or unfortunately, a lot of companies are born in cloud nowadays. So that's what
absolutely. I think that's super, super true. I mean, I think that's one of the greatest things about the cloud is that as I have an idea as a small business owner or prospective small business owner, if I have an idea, it's super easy for me to get started. It's super easy for me to scale if I need to. And my actual investment of capital is so low to get started. The bar of entry to start a business is so low. I think that's the best place in the world for startups to start. I think when you get into bigger companies, tens of thousands of employees, 30,000, 400,000, you get into those big kind of companies, a lot of their technology is somewhat, legacy. I'll say legacy because they've had it for 10 years, 20 years, that kind of stuff. There's no innovation that's happening. It's just running a part of the business. And from my perspective, it's like, maybe that's, hey, great, use cloud technology, use Kubernetes, use containerization to get your applications built, secure your hardware in a different way. You don't just have to, next install your operating system. You can bring cloud technologies into the data center, right? But I think for long-standing applications that aren't really being innovated on, it seems like data centers are probably the place to do that because it's just BAU at that point. Right. But if you're innovating and you're working on something, I think cloud's the right way. I don't know. Do you have a sense or feel about, my opinion?
Oh, yeah. See, my take on it is there is a reason most of the companies are born in cloud, right? It's easy to take it off, and startups especially are coming up in are born in cloud because they require a lot of innovation. They require like a lot of speed, a lot of agility. Everything is required, and cloud just enables you to do that. And the cherry on the top is that every year, every cloud provider comes up with more and more services, which makes their life easier. Earlier, like while you're like cloud is already taking away the headache of managing big teams, like infrastructure teams. It's also enabling developers. It's also enabling other pieces of the puzzle, right? Which goes into the entire engineering of things. They are helping out with multiple services, and it's just a joy to see that.
Yeah, I love that. I love that part of it. So I was watching the previous conversation between you and our team, and you mentioned that security becomes an afterthought a lot of the time. As a security leader, what's your experience been like balancing this dynamic? The culture happens as it's kind of happening. There's a lot of thinking, and especially by CTOs, about what features that they need to do. You have marketing kind of giving you a bunch of information about what they want to see in the products. Your salespeople are telling you they need this feature, they need this feature, they need this feature. And then, you start driving your engineering teams to go and deliver these features. And that's great. That's what we should be doing as a business, right? Is making sure that we're delivering capabilities that our customers actually want. And that's an important drive. But when security becomes an afterthought, that's probably not what you want. And again, having been the CISO for a product company in my life journey, I felt like I tried to get the DevSecOps stuff going. I call it Sec DevOps because I wanted it to be security, security first, right? But it's like getting thousands of people to kind of adopt a platform, adopt everything that you need to do to get that going. When we'll talk about that a little bit later too, I think. But when you're doing that, I still always felt that my small team, relative to the engineering and the CTO's organization, I was always getting product at the last minute to make sure that it was secure before we rolled it out. And with expectations that we set with our customer that this was going to be available at this point in time, they wanted the features and we were rolling out features, but it's like, I'm trying to have a balance between let's roll out what is correct and what's not. And like I said, I felt like it was an afterthought. It's like at the last minute, tomorrow's the day that this feature is due for this customer. And now we're throwing it to security and saying, I don't have a security approval. Let me go get the security approval. Do you see that a lot of the time, or what's your experience with this?
Yeah. So the smaller the company or the more innovation they're doing, you see random chaos. And this is all a byproduct of it, that last minute releases, etc. With time, I have learned to realize that security is a people problem. It's not a tech problem. There's a tech solution for everything. But people is what creates the whole friction in implementing good security, right? So I believe, I think whenever I've jumped into to a new organization, enrolling, I think all I'm doing for the first few months is just enrollment conversation. I'm enrolling a founder into the world which we are walking into, right? Like what we are trying to build here as security. Then talking to stakeholders, right? Talking to business folks. And I think it's about slight nudges across. If you do that, right, there is, from a founder level, there is an enrollment of, okay, if you want security if you want to do 0 to 1 journey or 1 to 10 journey, wherever you are, it's going to take an X amount of bandwidth. Security, I don't want to come around, or my team might sound like at times they're just pointing out problems, they're complaining, and fixing will go towards engineering, right? But that's the nature of the work. And we would not, and as I say, enrollment conversation, it's about that, hey, we would not just point problems, we would help you with the solution. Because with product security, a lot of time happens, you would send like bugs or vulnerabilities which are there, and when it lands to dev plate or product manager, they're like, hey, we can't fix this, because if we fix this in the manner which you are saying, the whole product goes for a toss, and then you have to put your creative hat on and then figure out solutions, right?
Yeah.
So from a leadership perspective, enrollment across that, there'll be bandwidth needed, right? And enrolling your team as well from security standpoint, that, hey, guys, you can't be a consultant, just a consultant here. You have to put your product's security hat on and think of it that, okay, one like the silver bullets, like you just park them one side. You look at the product, you look at what's needed from security, work with people, right? And that's one side of the thing. The other is, I think a lot of folks may just jump into, let me just look at everything and secure things, etc. I would say, look at where the company is so far. Have they done any security, right? If like, do they have backlogs? Let's look at them. Why those backlogs are there, right? And new stuff, as you bring new security process in place, you have to also be cognizant that there'll be more work which will come into your team's plate, which will in turn translate to more work for engineering team, whether it's DevOps, whether it's like developers, etc. So you have to have a balancing strategy on that. Hey, first I'm going to focus on my backlogs, right? Or if there are no backlogs, I'm going to look at my crown jewels. I'm going to look at the piece of this puzzle, right? And have a baseline security there, right? Those like issues which I've found, these are the ones we would be like the criticals and highs we're going to aim first, right? Now we've already done the enrollment conversation with with the founders, with the stakeholders. So we then put that into action, right? And constant enrollment is required because it's people. It's always hard for everyone to change their ways, right? They know they have an efficient system. And so you have to constantly remind them, okay, this is what we are aiming to. This is what we are working towards. There'll be some set of bugs which are going to come in your plate. Make sure you have one person dedicated for this work, for whose priority is security work, or entire team's bandwidth. Give me 20% of the team's bandwidth. And first time, I think more or less it will fail, right? Whatever your beautiful picture you're thinking, it will fail. You still keep empathy as your best friend and still enroll people, right? And I think it's about the second or the third time when you start putting your foot down that, hey, if you have come to me on a Friday with the code, this is security testing is not like I have a checklist. There is a checklist, yes, but it gets you to a certain degree. Security engineers have to understand things. They have to tinker well with it. If they're testing for 5 days, they might not have anything for 4 days, but on the 5th day, they might have a remote code execution, right? So I have put my foot down also that, hey, we can't roll out this project because we've had multiple conversations with you. We can't just do it this way, right? So then something which really helps is getting business exception approval, right? Get an exception from business that, hey, we are rolling out vulnerable code, and that's when things starts to move a little bit. So this is how the journey looks like in general, but it's a delicate balancing act. And I think enrollment is what you're doing as a leader all the time.
I think that one, again, you're kind of bringing back flashbacks for me too, especially around the enrollment conversations, right? And because I'm of the opinion that there's usually a way. There's usually a way forward. There's something that the engineering team wants to do. They're doing their current solutions are X, Y, and Z. And as a CISO, I'm like, maybe that's not the best choice, right? And some of those I can accept because, like you said, maybe this part of the system actually isn't involved in any way with data that I want to protect. Maybe it has nothing to do with the cardholder data environment, for example, or it has no PII that's being processed through it. It's off on some other part of the network. It's an important process, but it's not really, even if it does get compromised, it's not going to kill me, right? So I can kind of prioritize that way in some cases. Some of the issues, because we see vulnerabilities all the time that are considered highs or criticals, but the mechanism, like how it's going to be exploited, is really hard to tell. You might have other mitigating factors in other places. I've seen highs and criticals, for example, for Java vulnerabilities, but they only apply to Windows platforms. It doesn't apply to Linux platforms, and I'm running a Linux device. And it's like, okay, I can let that one go. So you have that part of it that you can do to kind of manage it. But on the second side is like dealing with security people that are checklist people, right? Because the enrollment, like you said, has to happen both ways. You got to bring the business along and the tech team along and make sure they understand why you have security concerns and what these security concerns are, and show them examples of how this is not good. But then on the other side, you also need your security team to be cognizant that all because your vulnerability scanner says this is high or critical, that they need to make sure that it applies to them and their situation. So it does take some amount of give and take by both the security team and the tech teams to kind of bring that together. You agree? Yeah, good.
Yeah.
So then, and I think the other great thing that you said was about the business, and it's okay to in your notes, right? Your release notes, to say that these are known and accepted problems that we're addressing. It's okay to let people know that it's better that that you have a problem and you let your customer know that you have a problem also, and that you're working to address it, than it is to let you put your product into their environment and then they do a scan on it and they come back with 500 different vulnerabilities that you have answers to. But that transparency, I think, is important. And I think you need business leadership to say, I'm going to accept this risk. And part of accepting that risk is running a good product security program where you're letting people know that you know about these problems, right? And you're either going to fix them or you're not going to fix them.
My take on that is I still push really hard on swaying it towards that, hey, we got to fix it. The general framework I have, which I think I've worked with quite a few folks across my career, and I pass it along, is that, hey, you have to have, just put it in any issue you find, just put it under to analyze it just on two principles: the ease of exploitability and impact it has, right? These two parameters itself, a combination of these will tell you whether something is critical or high, right?
Sure.
Now, the idea is that while you want to accommodate folks, because these are you will be working with engineering all your life, simple as it is, because they have to fix issues. So you can't put your foot down in every battle, right? So what you do is you explain them why this issue is there, what's the ease of exploitability, what's the kind of impact it has, right? And sway them towards fixing it and not rolling out insecure product. But if they have no, this has to go, I generally go all the way up till the senior level, leadership, that, hey, I'm worried about this. If there's a critical or high we are shipping our product with, I'm worried about it as a CISO. I can't say yes to this, but as a founder, you will have to bless this if you really think this is worth pushing, or let's have a conversation and figure it out. I can put some guardrails, right? I can make the ease of exploitability a little more difficult, right? Whether it's via means of firewall or via putting some rule set in infrastructure, etc., right? But the idea is to create more and more opportunity for the engineering team or the business team to realize that this is an issue worth fixing. This is an issue which needs bandwidth. And when they are in that process, also learn that these kind of things will keep coming. So let's have a process in place that a certain level of bandwidth is allocated for developers, for DevOps guys, for everyone towards security, right? And involve us from a business perspective, involve us as soon as you have a business requirement in place. If your sales team has gone and said that, okay, we're going to build this, we have this, and it has to be shipped to a client, let us know as soon as possible so that we can help you along the journey. You don't have to write code and then we find flaws into it and then you have to rewrite that whole code. It's just unnecessary, right? So let's save bandwidth. So I have that conversation with them as well. But the essence being less products, less features get approved as a business risk, that, okay, there is a vulnerability and we're just going to ship it, because that can build a habit as well, which I'm always worried about, that, oh, okay, we've pushed already 3-4 products which have vulnerable issues. Let's push more. Now we have a standard operating procedure around it, that hey, this is how we accept business risk. So that's something I'm always worried about.
Agreed. Yeah. I mean, and then, what you're hoping to do is make sure that your team, your security team, not everything needs to come to the CISO, right?
Yeah.
Most of these decisions can happen lower down. But again, it is understanding there's a business component to it, right? Technology doesn't exist for technology's sake. There's some business reason why we're doing what we're doing. And we need to make sure we understand the business risk that's actually involved. Like you have a matrix that you're thinking about, like, hey, how do you classify as critical and high? What I like to see in those kinds of things is monetary values associated with, like, this is critical means that my business is going to fail because of it. And there should not be that many things that are coming across technology that your business is going to fail because this technology exists, right? But there's definitely things like Log4j that you can't look at anyone with a straight face and say, something that came out, several years ago that we can't address today. Those are just terrible conversations to have with customers. So, but anyways, just kind of like, continuing the conversation, though I could probably talk about product security and this stuff for a while. As a security leader, what ways are there for security leaders to influence cloud adoption decisions? When, especially when they don't have direct control over outside factors such as budgets and engineering choices. I mean, the framework that I think about this in, just to kind of frame it, is I'm thinking that the business is making a decision. We're going to enter this market. We're going to target this customer segment, and we're going to solve their pains this way. The business leaders tend to not know how exactly that's going to be done by technology. And then the CTO comes on board and says, okay, I understand what you're trying to do. I've had experience with this before, and we're going to solve it this way. And then they might choose, this cloud provider running on Kubernetes, with this runtime engine and whatever they're going to do. They're going to pick a bunch of technology choices and languages and everything. And as a security person, we want to be able to influence this decision. Again, we've talked a little bit about enrollment. Maybe enrollment has something to do with that as well. But what do you think about how do we influence the engineering teams on making these decisions, these choices that they're going to be making from it?
There are quite a few pieces into it. Something which works really well is if you're already walking into a security team, then it's a different strategy. If you're building a security team, then it's a different strategy, right?
Right.
Why you do that is because while you're doing enrollment at the senior level, your team is going to do enrollment at their peer level, right?
Sure.
So that's there. What really helps is I think the sooner you get senior leadership's attention or like CXO's attention that, hey, security is important. There are multiple ways to attract that attention. Something which really helps is every now and then there is something which doesn't work well. Unfortunately, for certain companies, they get hacked, they go under, they are right from a growth chart, like a crazy growth path. Unfortunately, a lot of them cease to exist itself. That also happens, right? So that's one thing which I don't want to call it scare tactics. Please don't get me wrong on that. But it's more of a reality check, right? Mm-hmm. So that's something which is always important, that while you live and breathe security, rest of your peers may not. So getting them accustomed to that this is the real world we'll live in, that's helpful. Having a good set of non-checklist based security engineers, that's always helpful, because I think with time and again, they would end up finding some issues which are really good, and they become a tech talk. That, hey, security team is going to come and educate or spread awareness, right? That also helps, again, the enrollment, that, okay, the kind of work we are doing, it's not just like BAU kind of stuff. There is a research which goes into things that we have to constantly stay updated to our game, that, okay, what's the latest and the greatest going on, right? So all these steps will basically help you do enrollment better. And when spreading awareness really helps, because what you're essentially building is a bit like you're building a security culture. That is what it is. And and it's a marathon. It's never a sprint. It will never be a sprint. It's always a marathon. So you slowly and steadily nudge leaders from top, and your from an engineering level, your team keeps executing in the similar layers, right? Yeah, I think as a leader, your job is to tell security, like your team, that hey, you come from this security ethical hacker kind of a world, but then developers are building business, so you have to make a very nice marriage happen here, right? Because we are protecting the business, but they are building the business. You can't really deny that.
Right. I mean, I think that one of the things that I keep seeing is the number of vendor security questionnaires that happen today. I mean, it used to be you'd go into a business, you could just write a contract, but now a lot of, especially if you're starting an enterprise, you're always seeing those questions about, do you have these certifications? What kind of standards do you use? Have you had breaches? And they start asking you a bunch of security related questions, and you're hoping that you can tick the boxes so that you can get through the sales process as well. So I think that our buyers are also getting smarter about how do they buy products, and they're going to make sure that they're secure, especially international businesses. So I think that we do have that working for us as well. But it is a struggle. It is, I think at most companies, I think it's a struggle, mainly because I think there is a lot of FUD in security, where we talk about critical vulnerabilities all the time and how many we have, but at the same time, I don't think we see as many breaches occurring in our products that we're delivering as you would expect to see. If the likelihood and the impact of this vulnerability was so high, you'd expect to see more breaches. So
I think it kind of boils down to how easy it is to exploit, and how much motive someone has. If it's easy to exploit, then only motive is required, and then and they can find their way. And bug bounty programs have really helped shape that ecosystem well as well. Folks, I have heard about folks who have found the vulnerabilities but have kept with them, so they're waiting that bug bounty program starts, and I will then report it, right? So essentially, there are even ethical folks doing this while they're not exploiting the issue, but bug bounty motivations are there. But it's I think a lot of it boils down to Murphy's Law, that if something can go wrong, it will go wrong, and that's I think how security folks operate most of the time.
Yeah, I think that I love bug bounty programs. I think more companies should be doing those, but different conversation. I think that whenever I'm seeing problems occur, there's definitely that developer angle, and there's problems in your code that lead to other issues. I mean, people having public S3 buckets. There's all this kind of cloud security stuff that happens, but I keep thinking about issues that are going back to what we said. It's like the more people there are in the organization, the more people that you need to coordinate with. As you said, for most problems, there is a technology solution. One of the challenges is, how do we bring the people along? I tended to worry. I felt like the number of, in my experience with breaches that I've worked and incident responses that I've done, that there were a lot of misconfiguration kind of problems, but I tended to feel like most of my issues were around identity management, right? And most of my loss of control for those happened because of things that were happening at the user, between the computer and the chair, there's a user. And a lot of this today feels like it's happening, through the browser, right? And, our research is showing that the browser is a very powerful tool that sits on everyone's desktop. Lots of people are spending time in the browser today. I mean, you and I are recording this conversation and we're in the browser, and it's incredible that what we can do in the browser today that 15 years ago, 20 years ago, we weren't able to do. It's like, 20 years ago, that's right before cloud took off, right? And, browsers back then were just simple rendering engines for simple HTML. I remember how ugly websites used to be. And now I have this incredibly rich platform in front of me. But it seems like more than 80% of people's time is now happening in the browser. And we're seeing, our research is showing that what we can do inside the browser to take over systems, take over what's happening in the browser, take over what's happening on the box, right? We just had this one thing called browser sync jacking, where we eventually take control of a device, starting with an extension, right, that's running in the browser space. When you're talking to your customers, right, how do you think, and as a CISO, how do you think organizations should approach this attack surface, like what's happening in the browser?
Sure. So certainly, browser is a very important vector nowadays, because you're pretty much doing, as you rightly said, you're pretty much doing everything there on your browser, right? 80% of your time is kind of spent on it. And while you can, yes, as you said, via like browser, you can take over devices as well. But my problem starts with, okay, if you've taken over the browser itself, 80% of my work you've taken over, right? So you don't, like, we'll get to the device later. Right? So certainly an area where if you're not paying attention, you might be vulnerable to a lot of things, right? And extension is one way to do it. There are different, if you're running a vulnerable version of the browser, right, there is a different set of issues. If you have not gate kept what, if browsers are just allowed to open whatever they can, right, then you might end up into malware sites. You can download some malware, and it's essentially a very important vector nowadays, right? My strategy in general is to have one official version of browser, right? Essentially, a lot of Google Workspace, like folks, like a lot of companies are born like they're using Google Workspace or some similar workspace, have one particular version of browser. Like, okay, we're just going to use Chrome or Firefox or whatever, right? We're just going to use that. We're going to use the latest and the greatest over there. We will make sure that we use help of endpoint protection system as well, so that your browser is just not like misbehaving and it's able to access anything and everything out there, right? This is a nascent space. While all of this we are doing, we're not talking about 0 days. We're not talking about issues which we don't know browsers are facing, right? So it is a bit of a reactive process, to be honest. That yes, you are doing what's the best you can, and there is a bit of hope as well that your employees don't go around installing weird extensions, and also not block them in their day-to-day work as well, because they might genuinely need some extension to get their work done, right?
Absolutely.
Whitelisting is also another approach when it comes to URLs or things you can access via browser, but it all depends on how sensitive your asset is, or how sensitive your user is, right? Like where in the chain that user is. I have, for critical functionalities and things, like critical functions and critical users, we've even gone to a length where we had used workspaces, which would just will be brought up whenever you want to do some interaction. Like it'll be like AWS has workspaces and Google and Azure also has similar services, right? So for those critical areas, we were worried that browser is where we are doing all the operation. And if something is not working well, what would we do? So we had automated workspaces, which will come up when our sensitive critical user has to do operation. And then the entire workspace would be destroyed, and then it'll be brought up. So we've used different tactics, but there is no doubt that browser is one of the major vectors. And if not done well, it can be a recipe for a lot of disasters.
Yeah. Have you seen any, in that space, right? Definitely, like you said, it's where we're interacting with our systems, especially, you go to AWS and you're in the browser and you're creating a new workspace, right? You do all that in the browser. Having someone in the browser with you is kind of scary, right? Capturing credentials or doing all that kind of stuff, or knowing what your keys are as it kind of how when you get your keys in AWS, it kind of shows up and says, "Here's your key," save it, and we're not going to show it to you again. So it's ephemeral, or you believe it's ephemeral, but that doesn't mean if you have someone in the browser that they can't take it from you as well. Invariably someone's going to hopefully put that in a vault that's secure, but we'll see. On that path, and with your experience with Cloud Village, have you seen any interesting attack patterns that are happening between the browser and these cloud properties?
I've not seen very extensive, crazy attacks, but I've come across issues where you had an additional JavaScript which was loaded up in your browser, which was not supposed to be there, and it read the keys which only you were supposed to see, right? So these kind of examples I have come across, and it is concerning for sure. And it's just going to increase further and further because our reliance on browser is it's not reducing for sure. Like you can get your work done, a lot of things done with Chromebook, and like you can just have browser and you're just living your life and doing everything which you need to do. So haven't come across intense hacks, but like personally, but I have come across in via the medium of article. Personally, I've come across malicious JavaScript sitting on your system and you're not knowing what it's doing because it got loaded up somewhere, trying to access your local storage. It's trying your browser's local storage. It's trying to access your cookies, etc., etc. So
right, yeah. So someone injected some JavaScript in somewhere, and that's on the a lot. I've definitely seen that happen in in enterprises where systems got compromised, and you would think, like this wasn't on the I saw this back in a decade ago at least, where a very well-known news site had JavaScript, posted on their site that actually targeted particular financial institutions, and it would only run if you were if you were coming from address space from that financial, like a couple of different financial institutions and such. So, you see that kind of thing happen, right? And then, what we're seeing happen in our research and what we're seeing happen in customer environments, things like definitely the extension part is, there's a couple of different ways of controlling it. But like you said, people will install extensions. There are extensions that are necessary for folks to get their job done. And there are thousands and hundreds of thousands of extensions available out there. And it would be really hard for security teams to kind of manage all that kind of manually as people were asking for different extensions to do things. We're seeing compromises that are happening that start with an extension install and they end up stealing credentials from that environment, or of course, injecting code into tabs and those kinds of things. We're seeing those live happen in environments. We're seeing that folks believe that EDR tools and their SWG tools are protecting them, but we're also seeing that attacks are occurring. They might come from DocuSign, or they might come from SharePoint, or they might come from Microsoft, and it's going back to known infrastructure that we wouldn't be blocking. I've not seen people block AWS address space or Google address space or Azure address space because so many SaaS applications are hosted on these platforms. It would make it very difficult for us to manage that from a security standpoint, right? So, but what we are seeing is that there are compromises that are happening or that are coming from what are known good sites, but what's happening is not in the tenant that you're expecting. So, for example, you may think that you're going to a Microsoft Forms in your environment, but it's actually being hosted somewhere else, right? But it's still in that, SharePoint address space. With our tooling, what we're trying to do is detect everything that's happening in the DOM, understand the context and the, where we are, what tenant we're in, what applications we're in. Are we are we in a personal version of OneDrive, or are we in a corporate version of OneDrive? And then being able to make decisions on whether something should go here, whether we should load, a file from this location, or be able to copy and paste between those different tenants. What do you think about this kind of tooling? If you had this kind of tool in your arsenal, would that be useful to you?
Oh yeah, definitely. I think it's been a few months since I've seen the last version of your product, but I think when first time I talked to Vivek about it and I got exposed to this, I was very happy to see that, okay, there is something which can help me gauge better into what's happening with my browser and have a better idea, right? Rather than just being reactive. Like reactive security is not security. It's generally proactive, right? So so this browser, like the tooling which you have, really would help engage browsers well, what's happening there, and essentially get more insight on what's happening with your employees. Because a lot of times, if you look at any major hack also, it's about something which an employee or a high privileged user did something wrong, right? And everything starts from it. It can be initiated from different areas. It can be initiated from like an open source code you thought was good, but actually was like a little malicious. But it can also start from browser, right? Because a lot of you are interacting with that one entity for too long, right? So you have to look. I think this kind of tooling would be super helpful, and as more insight comes in for CISOs and for leadership, like they would find more peace in this area. Right now, there is a bit of chaos, that I can certainly say.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, again, going back to my own experience with, loss of control of keys and those kinds of things in a product environment. And I actually have like some patents pending on like just-in-time access to systems and that kind of things, because it was really a problem for me. Some of the things that I want, what I wanted to have and what I thought I would have would be things that would allow me to know that environment was protected. Meaning, like, so for example, one of the things that I'm working on right now is how do we make sure that it's one thing you have a developer who's working on a system. And, a lot of the environments that I've worked in, well, actually, I wouldn't say a lot, because most of my time was in military and financial kind of institutions and stuff. And they have a different level of pain that you have to go through to get things rolled out onto your environments. But in my very tech focused world, it seems like it's not uncommon for people and developers to have admin rights and being able to change the configuration of their environments. I don't know. Do you see the same kind of?
Yes. So that's a fantastic point. As companies grow, the smaller company, mid-sized company, they don't have a lot of hands on deck. And especially there, you have more privilege than you actually asked for, because in future you might need it, and I don't want to waste my time. Like, that's the approach folks can end up with a lot of times, right? And if you are going around as an admin or a super admin and your browser is not tuned to tell you that, okay, I am running something vulnerable, then it's a recipe for disaster. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I actually know one company that they made the decision they would rather have 30,000 people with access to admin rights, right, on their systems, rather than have a help desk, right? Meaning, because it was, most of their people were technical people. They were engineers. They always knew how to do things better than the help desk, you would think. But the bureaucracy of getting things done was so inhibiting to their development staff that they'd rather just have admins do it and then reduce the number of help desks. And then, then they had other controls in place that made things, it sounds crazy, but it actually worked out very well. And there were very few incidents in that organization compared to some of the other ones that I've had. So I'm not totally against people having admin privileges, but I am somewhat against not having controls in place, having admin privileges without proper controls in place to make sure things aren't going on. So one of the solutions I like is being able to make sure that when you're accessing critical systems, that whether it's AWS or your, SAP system or whatever those things that you're trying to connect, make sure that your browser is protected, that it has some sort of protection in it. Because again, a lot of people think that because they have SWG or EDR that they're protected. But if a malicious extension gets in there, someone inserts JavaScript from some other site into your environment, you gave too much OAuth permissions to another application, that there's so many things that could go wrong in the browser, that like knowing that you're not going to be able to copy and paste out of this environment, I think would be a good control to have. As a CISO, product environments, developers with a lot of admin tools, it could be a recipe for disaster. And I imagine that most people do believe that EDR is going to save them, but EDR really isn't inspecting what's happening inside the browser. If your browser, like you were saying, if your browser starts misbehaving, or all of a sudden it spawns a bunch of, remote code execution kind of stuff, browser, EDR, really good. But when you're doing your day-to-day work, the EDR is really just not going to know that this particular HTML code that you downloaded is malicious or not.
Yeah, EDR can only do the job to a certain degree.
Yeah.
And browser security is important. There are different ways to gatekeep. Like I've seen organizations use different ways to gatekeep as well, but that generally hampers functionality, and
right.
It creates friction in the friction in the working of everyone who's using those browsers, right? So rather having a system which can help you keep the browser more open but also secure, right? That's something which can always enable companies better.
Well, now you have something that you can talk to your customers about. So
for sure,
protect your crown jewels. Make sure that you're not copying and pasting out of your AWS secret keys vault into someone else's extension. So those kinds of things. So anyways, so you spoke about auto remediation on the previous episode of the podcast and how it should be brought in-house. Tell us about the challenges and complexities implementing auto remediation, given that cloud providers are so heterogeneous. And definitely it's so difficult. It's like, what do you call a LAN? I feel just I'm old. And I know LANs and VLANs and those kinds of things, like all the like standard data center talk. And I think when I go into cloud environments, I feel like I don't know what all these terms mean. They're all trademark names and that kind of stuff. So it seems like it's very heterogeneous. Even though I think the core principles of TCP/IP still apply, and core principles like how CPUs work still apply, and networking still works the same way it does. But from your perspective, what are the challenges and complexities implementing auto remediation, given that cloud providers are so heterogeneous?
Yeah, I think when I talk about auto remediation, right, it's more about you from a product security perspective and from a cloud security perspective, rather. You're looking at what are the kind of configurations I don't need. They should not be there, right? One simple example I can tell you is that why are my EC2 instances, like my compute instances, open to the entire world, right? If there is an SSH, like if someone has to SSH into it, they would be coming via a whitelisted IP address or a VPN. But why is it open, right? And more often than not, they are open. And while SSH is one of the mediums to get into the box and make changes, you are still running the concern of that. Okay, what if a 0-day come for SSH protocol itself, and then you've already kept the gates open, right? So
with
this example, I think the idea of auto remediation will get more clear. Auto remediation. So we looked into the system, like you look into the system and you see that, okay, do I really need that? At some point you realize that, okay, I don't. Now you can build a structure around using some cloud native services itself, right? That, hey,
In AWS, they call it security groups, for example,
Right,
and
right.
like different nomenclature across like different areas. So security groups will help you open a particular port to a world or to an XYZ IP address or a range. Now you can have a rule set in place. You can use like an alerting system in place where anytime a new security group opens up, right, and it is open to the entire world, like the IPs are 0.0.0.0/0, then close that right away, right? So this way, you know that you're building auto remediate, like you're understanding that, okay, at no point my business would not need a compute instance to be open to the world. Once that is set up, right, and once that is clarified with engineering, then you just put this control in place, right? And you obviously, you can start, you have to again enroll the entire organization, like at least from an engineering standpoint, that, hey folks, you can't have anything open, and before you go through that journey you would see a few boxes which would be open to the world. You do analysis and then you realize they were not really needed to stay open to the entire world, and then you kind of like restrict them, and then you roll out this policy that, hey, now we have put an automation in place, anything you bring up, it'll close itself out, right? So you, like, similarly, if you're an organization where no bucket has to be public, if you see any event around that, okay, like a bucket has become public, you can instantly make it like disable that, right? So these are the kind of smaller techniques which, like, if you look at a lot of hacks, they're about that someone got into like found an open bucket, right? It's in its concept, like it's so simple in a concept, right? Like, how don't keep your buckets open, but then at times you would have to keep certain things. You might end up keeping certain things open as well, right? Like, because they don't have sensitive data. Now you have to understand your ecosystem, see that something which is not supposed to ever happen, which is not a functionality, right? And then build automated guardrails around it so that the system fixes itself. You would not be able to do everything this way, but if you do 30% of it as well, that's 30% less work to worry about.
No, I agree. I think that there are definitely actions that you don't, like public S3 buckets. I mean, that's not the default configuration anymore from AWS, but it used to be that they were just public. And then, developers oftentimes, when they're developing things, they just want to get it to work, and they don't know if a security control is in the way or not in the way. And then so they tend to implement something in their dev environment. It really doesn't matter, right? I think that the issues become that when they go from dev to QA to prod, as they're kind of moving on that journey, or they don't know the details about how the entire system works, or maybe they're working on this component versus that other component, or maybe they inherited this component from another developer and they don't know why it's configured the way it's configured. And that uncertainty and doubt and fear, the FUD of like making a change and it not working, I think that kind of prevents people from doing auto remediation kind of activities. Even though, as hopefully, like you said, if you enroll people into the program, it's like, hey, we've made this decision that 0000 is not good to be open to the world. We're going to, anything that's SSH inbound has to be this particular rule set, which might be your corporate offices or your data centers or your bastion host or something else that you're using to get to that device, that you're closing up that shop. And then you have that agreement. And then it's like super easy to say someone implemented a security group that doesn't meet this criteria and then remediate it. And then it shouldn't be a surprise to anyone that happened. I think those are good. I think that again, the challenges are that when things stop working because you made a change, I always worry that it's going to come back to security to do it, to explain why they did what they did. But it's a rule set, just working in environments that I've worked in. On my side, I'd rather stop any more production releases until things are fixed and just like just stop it all, and then me having my security team or having my technology just auto remediate things. I think I'd probably be in the stop everything until everything's cleaned up. I've actually done that before because I don't know if I'm going to break something, right? And if we're going to make a change in environment, then you do definitely want to, in the best of all possible worlds, test it before you implement it and make sure that you're not going to be messing something up that you didn't realize was going on. Like, maybe you do have like some sort of file transfer that's going from one zone to another zone or from one place to another place. And maybe it's a customer file or something like that for like, electronic data interchange or something. And you don't know that IP address is outside your normal scope. And then you take off the 0000 and then, you can't sell to Walmart anymore. Right. And I think that would be really upsetting to some business people. As a security team, you need to understand the environment as well, understand the reasons why things are happening before you can decide whether this auto remediation should take place or not. There's analysis that you can do probably too. So,
yes, I think you have to look at the whole picture as one big concept and then try to find hacks to navigate through it.
Yeah. And I think that's awesome that you said hacks, because I think a lot of us don't realize that on the defensive side, on the enterprise security side, on product security side, they don't realize that security people, like good security engineers, good security practitioners, they have that hacker spirit. They have to know so many things to defend. It's like they don't just have to know how Linux works on Nginx with a MySQL database and make that app work. We have to also know the Windows version of it running IIS, or now we're running Apache over here. And it's like, if you get into an organization big enough, you might have 200 different tech stacks that are sitting there running around your environment that the security people have to kind of be managing all of those things. Right. And, but yeah, it's very much, I feel like, internal hackathons, it's like, how is this going to get this to work? You got to kind of hack through it.
If you are not innately curious, being a good security practitioner or a good hacker becomes a little bit challenging. But if you're curious, then you just say, why do you know about, you have so much additional information in your head because out of curiosity, you look them up. Right?
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
Yeah. From my perspective, like, I have a Kubernetes stack, and I'm constantly playing with those, with new technologies and everything else. I find it incredibly comforting to be able to like test things out on my own and see how it's work and like kind of understand like what the developer experience is. And, and it helps that my undergraduate degree was in programming. So I kind of have that background. I kind of understand what it is that they're trying to do, even though I've never been a product programmer trying to deliver features on a certain scale and certain time periods. Anyways, I think it's interesting. Where do you see like AI and ML making the most meaningful impact in cloud security over the next few years? I mean, do you think it's going to make an impact? Is it going to help you with cloud security?
I think so. I would like to think that it's already impacting a lot of areas of the world, including security. From a cloud perspective, I see identity and access management can leverage a lot out of it, because then there is a better pattern analysis. If there is a spike in some additional access which is given to someone and they are not like generally given this kind of access. So those kind of analysis, AI/ML can do it really, really well. Mm-hmm. And on the similar lines, investigation is going to be fun because you have a lot of data, right, all together if you're doing any kind of incident investigation, right, especially your SOC teams. So there, I genuinely see there would be a lot of gold sitting for AI/ML. I have a feeling auto remediation would also be fun as we go around with AI/ML.
Yeah,
because context again, if we've been talking about context a lot when it comes to product security, right? And these technologies are driven by context, right? As and when they get more context, they're able to take better decisions. So in future, few years down the line, we might see a lot of fun in these areas for sure.
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing about auto remediation. So I was, one company I was recently at, we were trying to push from data centers to the cloud, right? We're really trying to push to the cloud. And this is multiple companies I think are actually in this space where they're trying to get out of the data center, move into the cloud, get rid of their data centers, and kind of continue their IT journeys, right? And one of the blockers for that movement was just understanding how do their apps interact. It's kind of surprising that again, if you have NetFlow data, for example, in your data center, you can see what is going on with your apps. You can see that they're opening up connections over here, that kind of, all those kinds of things. And it seems like that would be a great use case for AI and ML to see all that kind of connectivity, watch it over 90 days or longer, because you really can't do things in a week or 2 weeks or 6 weeks because, you have daily processes, weekly, monthly, quarterly. You might even have annual processes that are happening between all these systems. Being able to take all that information and say, hey, these are how these systems are actually connected. And then I can just make sure that I'm thinking about how I'm moving from my data center environment to my cloud environment. And then, think about the information about how you can lock up the firewalls and, connectivity between different zones and those kinds of things. There's so much thing you can do with just NetFlow data if you applied some AI ML capability to it.
Yeah, I think, that context would be helpful. And even you can add the recent tech which has been doing a lot of rounds in security is that the eBPF side of the world, right? That can give you like a mind map altogether, and adding the AI and ML models into it just helps you migrate legacy systems as well, which no one knows how they're functioning, but they're still functioning because they were written 15 years back.
So, yeah, exactly. And then I think that's probably one of the biggest problems with security is that, internal IT teams don't have enough documentation about their systems, and any change that they want to make, for patching, because like you said, like there aren't a lot of technology problems. Like we know how to patch, Microsoft and Apple, they patch our systems, and Ubuntu, they patch millions and millions of systems well, right, with very few problems. But since we don't know our systems well enough, we're just kind of scared to patch. I think that's most of it. It's like people don't know what they're going to do if the system if it does fail after a patch. I think that prevents more patching than anything else. Anyway, well, let's talk about Cloud Village a little bit more.
Sure.
You've created an impressive community with Cloud Village while building your own security career. Was it difficult balancing both community building and business priorities?
It might seem like that it was difficult, but honestly, I didn't feel any difficulty in that.
Okay.
Why I say that is because I'm someone who started into security because of the community. Right? I was a developer in the first 6 months of my career, six or 8 months, and then I met security community, found this to be super cool. Started working towards it, learning from community, etc. So there's always been a very heavy amount of enthusiasm which I walk with when it comes to community, right? So it was something. Yes, it takes a toll, definitely, because you're managing a career, you're managing building this community as well. But that's the beautiful part about community, that people come in together if they feel comfortable in a particular space, right? If they know they can make an impact, you would always find a good set of people, especially in security, because it's so vast that you can't know everything. At the end of the day, you would bump into community that's like there is no escaping out of it if you're looking at constantly growing in your career, right? And if you're belaying the found, fortunately, I'd come across really good people when I was building Cloud Village, when I started off with it, and when I'm still going through. I've had some the fortune of working with some of the most amazing people, where at some point I have to tell them that, hey, I think you're doing a lot.
just take a rest, etc. So it is running Cloud Village. Building it was something more towards creating a space for people where they can come as they are and and get accepted. And along the process, I had to build a few frameworks where how at what level you are coming into your cloud security journey and you're tagging along, we will find something for you to do, because the moment you're doing something while you're contributing, you're also growing in that space, because you could not do that earlier. We have a tagging system where you get tagged along with someone who has done the next level of things which you are
Right.
at, and there are various levels which are there, right? So creating those frameworks took a couple of years, but once they got in place, it got a little lighter purely because of the people who were coming along and working, and it created a very positive domino effect where a certain type of people now just come in because they're like, hey, I want to have fun. I'm going to give my time. I'm going to learn, and let's have fun while we are doing this. And somehow it has worked out. And in parallel, the community contributed back to me, which I didn't actually envision, but that contributed back to me in terms of my growth as well as a leader, as a tech, like as a person who loves tech, getting me exposed to newer things which younger folks were doing, and managing them was another experience, because in community the hierarchy is not very not like, okay, you're going to have appraisals, you're going to have meetings, stuff like that. There's nothing like that. It's you've come in together for a common cause, and fortunately I just came across people whose common cause was to learn cloud security and not really stress out about it, have fun doing it, and it kind of worked out. So yeah.
I mean, when I was growing up in IT in the late 80s, early 90s, the number of people that were in the computer community were actually very small, or a very small group of people. We didn't have Google. Couldn't just do research. We had to kind of figure things out on our own, because oftentimes documentation was actually paper. We didn't even have CDs to put things on. It was a very, very, very archaic way of working. But the community was so small, and I felt like a lot of times I was kind of doing work on my own, just trying to figure things out. But I remember when my older son, he's also in cybersecurity. When he was kind of going into industry, I think one of the things I told him was find people around you, right? Find people, build a community, because you're going to need people. You can't do these things on your own. And as I've grown up as a leader as well, managing, small teams, 10s, 20s, hundreds, 600 people, those kinds of organizations, it definitely takes a community of like-minded individuals to kind of move things forward. You're not going to do this stuff by yourself. And it's finding those people, whether, especially in a group like Cloud Village, where it's like just volunteer people that show up for the DEF CON or RSA and being brought into the community and taking something away. I think it's an incredibly positive thing for especially growing security practitioners, right? To see that other people have been on this journey. And I think that's one of the very, very strange things about the security community is that I don't think people know what they're going to do next. And I think that's actually okay. It's like, get to the hurdle that's right in front of you. Right now you're on this path. And, maybe this path is the path that you go on for 30 years, but maybe you get to that next hurdle and that doesn't feed you anymore. That doesn't feed your soul anymore. And you're going to have to pivot. I think the great thing about the villages is that you can go and see other things that are around that maybe that is actually way more interesting to you, and you can hit your flow feeling, that feeling where your interests and your passion and your ability kind of come together, and that fuels the fire. So I think it's a great service that you're doing with Cloud Village here to allow people to experience cloud security and what it means to that community of practitioners, right? So it's because it's helping younger, especially younger, I think, practitioners figure out what they're going to do next.
Yeah, I think pretty much most of the credit goes to people who are who have come in year over year and have volunteered and have actually treated it as their home, not like a place they're coming down to work. They're just like, there's a group of people who are there. The new people come in, they welcome them with open arms. There are folks who join, who take a break for 2 years and then come back again, and then we're just happy to see them. So it's all thanks to the folks who have joined us over this last 7 years and made this possible, and it's been fun.
Yeah. So I saw that that Cloud Village is now accepting storytelling talks at RSA. What's the story behind storytelling? Unintended. Yeah.
Yeah, so we've been doing talks, tool demos, lightning talk workshop for a while, right? And we had there's one more format which we're tinkering with, and we might bring that to RSA as well. But storytelling this is one of those times where we have a very nice, intimate setup of like seating space of 18 to 20 people, right? And storytelling becomes more fun when it's according to me or according to us, like if it's an intimate setup, right? Then the joy of storytelling is a little different, right? Versus telling it in front of 300, 400 people, right? So this is what we wanted to create. We wanted to take the opportunity that we have an intimate setup, bring in storytelling, let people ask questions while the story is there, right? Like, okay, what did you think about that? When a smaller group or an intimate setup is there, I think there is an ease, like relative ease towards asking random questions, like what were you thinking at that juncture? What were you thinking at the final part of it, or when you started, right? So that's the idea of storytelling. And we are hopeful that we'll have some good storytelling talks there.
I like it because I think that there's lots of good stories and lots of good experiences inside. I mean, I think a lot, like you're saying it, and I have stories that I want to tell for sure. When it's interactive, I think it's better, right? When people can follow up with a question and ask, for whatever reason, someone thought that was interesting and stuff. I think it's a great format. I'm looking forward to seeing it in action and hearing about it. What else can we expect to look forward to this year's Cloud Village at RSA?
As I said, because this year we have an intimate setup, we are trying to capitalize, or I think the right word is to use that place well and get more engagement in place. Like, right, you will have a Capture the Flag event, which will keep going for 3 continuous days. And we are there for 4 days, 29th, 30th of April and 1st of May. We're also, like, there are talks, like the call for papers is open. It's going to close out soon. And the talks will go through review panel, and we'll have different, like, depending on the quality of things we'll get, we will have that set up in play. CTF would be going on. Storytelling is another piece into it. We're also tinkering with the idea of having small CTF sessions run by our CTF group, where they handhold you that, hey, I know it's been 2 days and you've been banging your head with a particular challenge. Here is an hour dedicated. Bring us your things. We would not give you the answer right away, but we'll nudge you in the right direction, right? Or also tinkering with the idea that we'll actually walk people through a few challenges, few easy ones, right? So that it acts as a springboard for them, and they get. Honestly, we want to get them hooked to this dopamine hit, where I found the flag and I learned a few things along the way, right? So that's also another thing which we are planning to bring. And obviously prizes for top 3 teams, shout outs on social media and on website, etc.
Yeah, I think people learn the most when they experience some pain. Like if it's like really frustrating to kind of get through this part of the CTF and you've been banging your head, and then just giving them that little bit of a hint, and letting them move forward, I think that's going to be a joyous experience for people because they want to complete it, right? And then the alternative is like you only got 30% through, and you didn't complete it, and you're just sad because you're at the bottom of the leaderboard. That's less 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 inspiring. So I like this. I like that format.
So, on that front, sorry I missed, but we have a few Cloud Village goodies like badges, T-shirts, etc., which we're bringing in, and we are aiming that hey, if you solve 2-3 challenges, then you get a badge, etc. Right? So we are trying to incentivize in that front, and some of our like a couple of our crew members are also giving a workshop in RSA's CTF track, where they've been doing like building CTF challenges and running Cloud Village for quite a few years now, and they want to impart that wisdom for folks who have been playing CTF for a while, but also showcase them the approach with which we build challenges and how you can solve it, how to avoid rabbit holes, how to keep stay focused on anomaly. So that's another event which is happening, like which our CTF crew members are going to deliver, not in Cloud Village space, but rather in the CTF space of RSA.
This is really good for incident response teams, because I mean, there are so many rabbits in enterprise environments that you got to keep people focused. So that's a good learning track too. Anyways, our previous guest asked, if there was no internet, what would you choose as a career?
I think I am wired a bit like an engineer, to be honest. So, and mechanics, I still am very fascinated when I see a mechanically automated production line. I'm like, how is this happening? So mechanical engineering resonated really well with me, and I would have probably been a mechanical engineer somewhere. My dad also, I come from a entrepreneur family where they're like on a small scale. Dad used to do a few things, but they were around automotives and cars, etc. So mechanical engineering, I've seen it as I was a kid, and my inclination has been crazy. So you would have probably, either it would have been around the automobile world or doing mechanical engineering part.
Super cool.
Or probably what do I say? Like someone teaching driving to folks. I think that's something I can do. Yeah.
Awesome. So what question would you like our next guest to answer?
I honestly, while I had a few questions around that, okay, if you were born 200 years ago, what would you be doing, right? But I think I would rather love to ask that 10 years down the line, if you get bored of security, what would you do? What is the next area which you want to pivot towards and see where life takes you? So yeah,
that's a great question. Jayesh, I'm super happy to have hosted you, and thank you for the wonderful conversation. And I can't wait to see you at RSA.
Beautiful, John. It was a pleasure being here. Thanks a lot for creating this environment and where I could just speak up. And it was a fabulous conversation. And I look forward to seeing you at RSA, and it'll be fun.
Thanks, Jayesh.